Have people run across Seymour Papert before? Is this a familiar name? Okay, so Seymour Papert is a guy at MIT, really neat guy. Has this idea of what he calls the knowledge machine. Not this. This is a machine that makes knowledge. He thinks about something that he calls an object to think with. And an object to think with is variously his definition of a knowledge machine and of a computer and of generally different kinds of things you can use to think with. One of the things that he had kids learn to think with was a turtle, and he developed a programming language called Logo, which, depending on your age, you may have actually gotten at some point in school. Some of you maybe not, actually. And you would have had to have been kind of in 8th grade in, say, 1982 or something like that. Well, he develops this language, and he has this turtle that's actually a robot. But these were machines that he was intentionally having kids work with. And eventually, Commodore, for example, the Commodore 64 came with a copy of Logo with it for free. And so it was this programming language, and teaching, the idea that you could teach kids to program was just bizarre at the time. And he thought that this was the core time to teach kids to interact with the machine, because they would learn much more than just programming by learning to work with the machine. He's also the driving force behind Lego Mindstorms, which is, again, the same idea of getting computers and robots into kids' hands as early as possible, not because you want them to build robots, but because through the process of building robots, they learn about their world. So it's an efficient way of making them learn. These are called Lego Mindstorms. His most famous book is called Mindstorms. He's also the moving force behind the one laptop per child computers. And the one who pushed it into the Maine, still in Maine, that project is still going. If you're in 8th grade, you get a laptop. And he pushed Maine into that and suggested that this was the way to go. And has been kind of, not directly operationally involved, I don't think, but the inspirational force behind the one laptop per child project. So, but this idea, and his school, he has a school that is based on his principles in Boston, and a number of other places have kind of taken up this idea of letting people play with really expensive robots, is pretty opposite from what most of you probably experienced in your high school days, depending on whether you went to an alternative school in Boulder or went to a public school in anywhere other than Boulder, I guess. And so if you look at schools, have people been in high schools lately?
I have a metal detector in my high school.
Yeah. You mean now or from before?
Before. We had one at the first school shooting.
All right. Congratulations.
That's a good thing.
But I mean, that's not, I mean, at the time it was, when that started, it was bizarre. And now it's bizarre if it's kind of quaint if you hit high school, it doesn't have a metal detector going in. It's strange to find high schools without razor wire around them. And that's not the kind of least of it. It's, it's regimented, it's, you have times when you are supposed to be in class and times when the bell rings and you're supposed to move to your next classroom or cell. It doesn't really matter. I mean, one of the things that Durkheim, when we talked about last week for the fundamentals of religious life, one of his arguments was that schools are meant to be reflections of what people do in the real life. And it may be that kind of regimented process was something that people did at one point. That if you worked in a factory, you did have to be there at a particular time, you had to move with the clock, everyone had to be doing the same thing at the same time. But I don't think that's a reflection of what most people do when they're done. Most people end up in service jobs, but even that is not reflected in the curriculum right now in regular schools. So how do you move outside of that? Well, a lot of people are talking about one of the easiest ways to move out of the structure of the school is literally to move out of the structure of the school. So back in the 1990s, people started playing with PDAs. Sometimes in the classroom, but more often going out and collecting data, sharing data. At a conference that I just came back from in Australia, there's someone at MIT who is distributing, or a group at MIT at the Media Lab, distributing this software on PDAs where people kind of go to historical sites and they go and interview people. In other words, they walk into a place that's an actual building that is a historical building, but they have this virtual text person on their PDA. And so they do kind of a detective story where they move through this physical space and come up with a perspective on, in this case, who fired the first shot at Lexington. And so they kind of, a group comes in and they feel like they are in some ways experiencing that event, even if it's as a reporter, kind of as or a detective of some sort. At least they're physically involved in it and kind of interacting with this in a way that they're making sense of. They're constructing their idea of what happened as they're moving through it. Duke University famously last year gave out iPods. I've talked to professors at 2 other universities now who, if they don't give out iPods, at least have signed on to iTunes University, iTunes Campus, I guess is what they're, does anyone know what that's called? The iTunes Campus? I don't know. They're actually rolling out some really neat stuff now that allows for full lectures to be recorded and podcast for video iPods. But this, because students already have the technology, has become a real push. How do we move audio to iPods? And everywhere but the US, because we're slow on this stuff, how do we move this, how do we make use of mobile phones in educative situations? And so one of the workshops I went to there was based on that. And both graduate and undergraduate and high school and even grade school students are making use of mobile phones to, again, move through spaces, record audio and combine it, share ideas among groups so that you can work as a group but distributed. Again, I don't know how well that would work in the US. I can't imagine you telling parents we're going to Manhattan and letting our 12-year-olds loose on the city to share. It's not going to happen. Whereas in Norway, I have a colleague who works in Norway, and she likes where she lives because her kids walk home from school through a forest, and sometimes they take a couple hours, but she thinks that's good for them. I mean, and that kind of, we don't have that sort of same, I think, in most cases, we don't have that same kind of feeling about our kids. The idea that they, or in Japan, the 6th graders and 5th graders take the subway home on their own. You see them hop on the train with their backpacks and hop back off, and I don't think we get that here as much. So there's both cultural, again, the cultural and the technological. A lot of, I don't know, does anyone have any kids in that age group? Do they have cell phones, mobiles?
Actually,
Just now.
Well, my son started going off to the strand on his bike like normal boys do, but
Yeah.
for a couple hours I don't know where he is.
Yeah.
So he's got a cell phone.
Are you tracking him too?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I just meant,
I have to trust.
Yeah. You have to trust what? Trust but verify? Is that the cell phone thing? Okay. So where do we go from here, I guess is the question. And again, this is just a short intro and we can talk about it more after. Okay. 3 ideas here: augmented reality, wearable computing,